Gun sales absolutely boom as polls show a majority of Americans fear a post-election civil war. In this video, we're going to take a look at the surge in gun buying that's been going on now for the last few months, how concerns about mass post-election violence are at least in part fueling brand new gun purchases, and what scholars are saying are indeed the chances that we may see a civil war erupt in view of the election's results. You are not going to want to miss this one. Greetings, everyone, patriots all across the globe. Dr. Steve here with you. Great to be with you as always. If this is your first time here with us and you're looking for some daily encouragement and optimism as well as analysis to help you make sense of these crazy times we're in, we have found your oasis in this channel. We post 2 videos a day, analyze the current events, analyze some super awesome conservative trends so we can all live in the present in line of even better things to come. So if you haven't already done so, you know what to do. Make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. It'll be an absolute privilege to have you as a regular part of this channel where each and every day we together celebrate the inevitable collapse of left-wing globalism and the unstoppable rise, can't stop it, of a new conservative age. Before we jump into things here, let's give a huge shout out to the sponsor of this video, and that's collagen, available at my special website, healthwithsteveturley.com. Now, if you don't know, collagen may be the closest thing we'll ever get to a real fountain of youth. Many health experts now agree that consuming collagen helps to renew and revitalize how you look and feel. Taking collagen regularly can revitalize your body. It can make your skin, bones, and even hair look and feel more healthy and youthful. I use it every single day. I put it in my coffee in the morning. It tastes great. And if you click on that link below today, you can get 51% off your order. So do not wait. Click on that link below today and get your own collagen supply. You'll be glad that you did. All right, gang, let's dive right in here. Some fascinating stuff going on. Gun sales are absolutely booming throughout the nation as a new poll shows that a clear majority of Americans fear the breakout of a post-election civil war. Let's start with the figures on gun sales. According to the FBI's National Instant Background Check System, September had the highest number of background checks conducted in the system's 22 years of existence. When compared to September of last year, 2019, gun sales soared from 2.2 million purchases to nearly 3 million this September, 2.9 million to be exact. Again, this past September marked the busiest September in the 22-year history of instant background checks. Federal background checks were up by over 400% in Delaware and Washington, D.C. when compared with September of last year. And Georgia, Maryland, New Jersey, Rhode Island, and Utah also a 100% increase. And September continued the unprecedented surge in gun purchases throughout the whole pandemic period, which was made all the worse, of course, by the race riots. Gun sales increased nearly 60% in August, which was followed by a 135% increase in July, and even more astonishing 145% increase in June. All told, already as of this year, nearly 20 million firearms have been purchased, which is several million more than the total sales in 2019, and we still have 3 months to go yet in the year. Here's something that's absolutely fascinating. I don't know if you know this. According to the National Shooting Sports Foundation, an estimated, get this, 40% of firearm sales in 2020 have been first-time gun buyers. That would mean that from January to August, over 5 million Americans purchased firearms for the very first time. Now, I wonder how many of them plan on voting for Joe Biden and his promise to appoint Beto, hell yeah, we'll take your AR-15s, O'Rourke, to oversee his gun policy. Now, we're beginning to see what's appearing to be a major impetus, a major reason for this massive surge in gun sales. A recent YouGov poll of over 1,500 registered voters found that 56% of respondents said that they expect to see, quote, an increase in violence as a result of the election. Now, they responded by saying that they expected to see riots, looting, burning, and trashing of cities as a response to the outcome of the election, which means at least I'm assuming that a majority believe that President Trump is going to win, right? When Trump wins, I mean, we really do have the potential of seeing some pretty massive violence in our cities. The YouGov poll was corroborated by another poll conducted by the Engageus group that found that 61% of Americans agree with the concern that the United States is on the verge of another civil war. Interestingly, 52% of consumers have stockpiled food or essential goods in anticipation of mass social unrest tied to the outcome of the election. Now, the notion that the election could indeed spark a widespread violence and possibly even civil war is increasingly being seen as a very real possibility. The Washington Post has published several articles of concern that widespread violence isn't just possible, but is indeed the most likely scenario. Now, what's so interesting when you read through these assessments, they're all centered around the completely unsubstantiated notion that President Trump will simply refuse to leave office if he loses the election. That's what's making these left-wing activists disguised as journalists over at The Nation so nervous, nation.com. I came across this article in The Nation entitled, "Is Trump Planning a Coup d'etat?" And what they're so worried about at The Nation is that they saw Trump's actions in Portland, where he sent in federal agents to arrest and disband the rioters and looters and Antifa-linked unrest there. They saw that as basically a dress rehearsal for Trump preparing something similar if he loses the election in November. That's what these far-left activists disguised as journalists are so utterly freaked out over. It's actually very, very fascinating. They are openly recognizing that if Trump wins big on November 3rd, on Election Day, he can in turn exploit all the confusion and uncertainty surrounding the mail-in ballots that have yet to be counted to his own political advantage. In other words, this whole mail-in ballot fiasco that the Democrats thought they could use to basically steal the election, they are now openly fearing that it can be effectively co-opted by Trump and exploited for his own political advantage. He's going to sow so much doubt and skepticism on the electoral fairness and integrity of the mail-in ballots. Indeed, he already has. He's going to employ thousands of lawyers to contest every single district and county that he wins on November 3rd to turn around and stop the mail-in fraud. And they're very concerned that he's going to deploy federal agents and, in effect, militarize the election process. This is how leftist liberals are thinking today. Look at this one. This is a piece by Trudy Rubin, the Philadelphia Inquirer. We've talked about this. Trump's promotion of armed militias risks stoking civil war. It's a very interesting piece. She's clearly a left-wing activist disguised as a journalist, but her concern in the article is that President Trump, however inadvertently, is indeed actively mobilizing armed militias by virtue of his endorsement of them. And her point in all of this is that Trump, when all said and done, is openly promoting vigilantism. According to her, like we saw with Kyle Rittenhouse in Kenosha, and that vigilantism is going to inevitably spark a civil war. So there's no question that when we see polls like these that show a vast majority of Americans fearing post-election violence and civil war, they are indeed amplifying what the mainstream Marxist media is openly considering and predicting. So this obviously raises the question, what are indeed the prospects for a civil war or mass violence post-election? The good news is that we have some studies on this very question. But first, I want to make sure you know that we're offering, for a limited time, my Nationalist Populist book bundle. For a limited time, you can get my 5 best books on the rise of nationalist populism all over the world. So we're talking The New Nationalism, The Return of Christendom, President Trump and Our Post-Secular Future, The Triumph of Tradition, and Uprising on the Yellow Vest Populist Revolt. You can get all 5 of these by clicking down below at a 30% discount coupon if you sign up by clicking on the link down below. So, and you can also get like Turley Talks, tumblers, and all this other merch. It's awesome. Click on that link below, sign up for your 30% coupon. It's a limited time, so do that today. All right, we've got some really interesting studies that have looked into the nature of post-election violence in other national contexts. And so we at least have some critical assessment of the possibility of post-election violence in our own national context. Now, one article I ran across drew from research surrounding Kenya's 2007 presidential election, where the incumbent president won, a win which sparked waves of protests, riots, and ethnic violence, where 1,500 people were ultimately killed another 600,000 forcibly displaced. And from post-election violence scenarios like this, social science researchers have identified the social conditions necessary for post-election violence to break out. So, for example, one constant for post-election violence seems to be weak political institutions. And this is where, electoral fraud is the norm. There's mass distrust among the population for the integrity of political institutions and the process and politicians. Now, ironically, the author of this article actually thinks that somehow the United States is rather immune from this. I've got to wonder about that when you have Democrats openly promising to stack the Supreme Court and grant citizenship to 15 million illegals and incorporate Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico as states, all in a deliberate effort to guarantee that nationalist populist Republicans never come to power again. I don't see why half the country is going to want to go along with a political system that's so blatantly and obviously and deliberately stacked against them. A second characteristic of post-election violence is the inability for governments to stop it. In Kenya, much of the violence was sparked and perpetrated by unofficial militias that the government was either unable or unwilling to stop. Again, we saw this with our race riots in our nation's cities. While they weren't militia-inspired, they were allowed to take place as Democrat mayors and city councils deliberately abdicated their law enforcement responsibilities. And finally, a huge predictor for post-election violence is that it's happened a number of times before, which was the case in Kenya and is certainly not the case in the United States. Demonstrations and protests, yes, but we have very few, if any, actual full-blown post-election mass violence in our history. So while scholars tend to see America as relatively immune from widespread post-election violence, I've got to admit that I'm not that convinced by their rather unfounded optimism here. I think we are in the midst of a massive clash between the forces of globalism and the forces of nationalism. And that clash already has resulted in some very significant violence and can most certainly continue to escalate in that violence. We'll, of course, have to see how it plays out. But whatever the case, more and more Americans are indeed preparing for post-election violence as gun sales are surging like never before. Now, before you go, make sure to like this video, comment down below, and subscribe to my channel. And you will definitely want to check out my latest video I just uploaded on how Mike Pence utterly humiliated Kamala Harris in the vice presidential debate as nationalist populism won bigly. You're not going to want to miss that. So make sure to click on the link, and I will see you over there. God bless.